Okay, Cheryl, you're in there somewhere, I presume. I mean,
Yes.
yes, she is excellent. Okay, apologies for the
Hey, Cheryl.
belated beginning, but welcome to the August 24th, 2021 Winchester Planning Board meeting. We are this evening being recorded both on Zoom and also, I believe, by WinCam. Thank you, WinCam. So let's do a roll call vote to make this official. Um, if you just say present when I call out your name, Teaching Scott,
Present.
Cheryl Wolf,
Present.
Sally Dale,
Present.
and Diab Jury is also present. The four planning board members. We also have with us Brian Zucchelli, town planner, Brian Manter, assistant town engineer, Nancy Pocari, uh, our recording secretary, and we have some members of the public here who for some of our agenda items. So why don't we jump right into our updates? So Brian, anything quick you wanted to talk about?
I guess the quick is that the Waterfield Task Force first meeting is taking place tomorrow night. There won't be a public comment period at that time. It's mainly for the task force to start their discussion. There will be a time for public input during, I believe it's September 13th session. But that starts tomorrow. That's the quick update. We're a little behind, so the only other thing I guess we were going to potentially talk about an update of a meeting that we had today of Sally Diab and David Miller of the Conservation Commission related to trees and potentially a tree bylaw over the next year potentially. So Diab, I don't know if you wanted to take over that, but I think that'll be all for me for the moment.
Okay, I just wanted to add a little bit to the Waterfield Task Force, just so for people in the audience. So even though you may not be able to give input at the next couple of hearings, the first several of the Waterfield Task Force meetings will be an in-depth educational forum on what for instance, the financial aspects of affordable housing. So it will be going into fairly in depth into all of the issues that were of concern with the Waterfield project. And we have a couple of really knowledgeable people who will be briefing the task force members about those things. And so for the public that wants to learn about the complexities of affordable housing, this is an excellent way to learn about it so that when the public comment period comes up, you will be able to provide some really good input. So the one thing I want to talk about in our meeting today is, so one of the committees, one of the group subcommittees, if you will, that the planning board formed with the Conservation Commission was one looking at creating a new tree bylaw, a tree preservation. We came upon, we're talking more about a tree canopy or an urban forest bylaw. Those are sort of the visions we have. Heather Hannon was on that committee. And so I think the only thing that we can really do this evening, other than talk about that this committee exists, is to come up with someone who would replace Heather on that committee. Um, so the idea would typically we were meeting about once every 3 weeks. We would probably resume that sort of a schedule. So if I am currently on that subcommittee, and so the floor is open to the other three planning board members who would like to have a place on that committee. So if you want to just say that you're interested, then we can discuss, or we can draw a short straw or something like that. Or I can give you more information if you need it.
I think I need more information to be able to understand what kind of
Okay.
expertise is needed. So,
Okay, that's a good point. Why don't we do this then? I don't want to keep the people from 88 Harvard Street waiting. Um, Brian, I'm hoping that this is just an administrative thing so that we don't need a special action or an agenda item on this. If we discuss what the subcommittee does, and then is that just administrative enough, or do you think that we really should come back and put this on our agenda?
I don't necessarily think that this is worthy of, if it's worthy of a vote. I mean, I think it's who's interested, if there's interest, or if we can't decide in the next several minutes between us, that we should table it for a different time.
Well, I'm thinking maybe we could move it to after we discuss town meeting articles.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, so why don't we do that? Why don't we jump straight into 88 Harvard Street, then we have a hopefully a fairly short discussion of town meeting articles, and then we can take up the tree bylaw subcommittee. So why don't I turn it over to you, Brian, to set the stage for 88 Harvard?
Sure. So this property has been known to us for several years now. Um, um, Members of the Historical Commission, as well as their consultant, Claire Dempsey, have reviewed and inventoried this house at 88 Harvard Street. The Historical Commission has come up with a list of conditions that they would feel is appropriate to restore the current house, as well as some thoughts about what will the new house look like. The Lions have agreed to that, and have this letter that you see here from July 30th on the screen. Essentially is a letter of intent or a letter of agreement that they will include in their package for when they apply for a special permit or a waiver for a natural or historic resource preservation. So they're planning to apply to the ZBA soon after this meeting, based upon several meetings that they've already had with the Historical Commission, and that's where this letter was derived from. And they want to have kind of a last pass before they actually go into permitting, to see if there's anything that they should be looking for to either include in this package to the Zoning Board of Appeals or other general comments. So I think, if I didn't cover everything, I would probably turn it over very quickly to the Lions to see if they wanted to expand on that, and then go through the plans that they have. I also saw that John Clemson was here, and they could expand on that. The big thing, I'll stop after this. The big thing that is, I think, unknown at the moment is exactly what that preservation restriction is going to look like. Anderson and Krieger, our legal counsel, is fully aware that will need to be done prior to any decision by ZBA, or potentially even a certificate of occupancy. It could go that far, but the point is that it's part of the zoning bylaw. It doesn't even have to be in the decision, although it will be. But the point is that it's part of the bylaw. They have to do it. And they've already agreed to comply with it, saying that they would put a perpetual preservation restriction on. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I'm not sure if it's Sean or Brendan on the line, but why don't you go right ahead?
Yeah, we're both here. How are you?
Wonderful. Hey, hi Sean, hi Brendan. So I have the plans here that you can go through, and you can guide me through the plans and let us know what if I didn't cover everything in that intro.
No, everything's fine. The house that there is kind of beat up. It was brought to my attention that it's historical, and they want to keep it historical, meaning the front porches, the window sizes, the window locations, the exterior. Naturally, it has to be new, but it has to be looking the same way. And that's what we plan to do. And basically what it is there's going to be a room in the first floor. We'll have a room in the basement. So it's a first floor basement apartment. And the second floor and the third floor will be another apartment. It's pretty straightforward. The issue, I believe, that the historic people have is more or less the the look of the outside of the house, which we will replicate. And if we can't replicate it, we'll bring it to their attention, and they can tell us whatever they want to do. And that way, the thing gets done in a historic way, keeps the historic people happy. At the same time, it makes the neighborhood a lot better, because what's there now is terrible.
All right, Sean, I think the only point that the Historical Commission had made that there needs to probably be closure on sooner rather than later is this idea of the front door. The Historical Commission had preferred, I believe was the word, to have a single entrance and then have the units off of those. But you know, I think we need to find out the wiggle room of that, because as we looked at floor plans, and we can talk about this, maybe this is something that we could talk about, is the fact that there's modern living makes it sometimes difficult to even bring a normal, a 6 foot, 7 foot couch, or something like that, just in and up. So that's kind of a really easy way to determine it. But one thing to note is just whether or not how much wiggle room in the Historical Commission. I believe that was the kind of largest point on your side, Sean.
Yes. Well, the issue of the railings also, but that's I think the railings that are there have nothing to do with historical, but I'll put whatever railings you want there. But back to the doors. Having one door and going in and two doors, it's really not the way to go. And I was hoping to have two doors. And I mean, if I can't have two doors, can I have put a front door on the side of the house? Well, no, you're probably not going to like that. That's probably not going to agree to that. But I think two doors in the front is basically the only change we're going to make to the house, to the whole exterior of the house.
Mm-hmm. So, but I think it's a question of whether whether you want to see John Clemson is here, and whether or not you want to see the wiggle room there, or if you wanted to kind of just go to the board all around to see if there are any thoughts to begin with.
Whatever you people want to do.
I'm sorry, Brian, my connection as usual is bad, and I just lost the entire sentence you just said.
Sure, I was saying John Clemson from the Historical Commission is here. If we want to see how much wiggle room or what there is with potentially this the front door, whether it's one front door or two front doors, or if you just wanted to go to the planning board first.
Why don't we, well, let me ask the planning board. Does the planning board want to hear from John first, or do they want to speak amongst themselves? Ourselves.
I'd like to hear from John.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so why don't we, John, if you want to go ahead. Do you have anything you wanted to display, John, or are you just going to speak with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Nothing to display. I think Brian has all of the images that we could possibly want. I'm sorry, but I can't speak for the whole commission. I'm afraid this is probably going to have to, this change is going to have to just go before the commission, see what they think. I think it's a straightforward decision. It's a fairly substantial change, but it may be a possibility. I hope that answers the question.
John, can you be more specific about the substantial change?
Well, I mean, we're changing the pattern of openings and the entry sequence on the house. So, on the other hand, we're hopefully substantially preserving the rest of the building fabric. So can the historical commission live with this change? I hope that explains it. I mean, it's a matter of negotiating and taking a vote, I think.
Okay. Well, thanks. I guess that's, as you said, that's about as much as you can tell us. It's got to go back to the board. So if the planning board, or I say the historical commission, if the planning board has any other questions of John, or you want to start discussing this project? I have a couple.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
this is Yi Ching. For the sake of people who are just being introduced to this project, could you identify and just articulate what the historic resources you are trying to preserve are here in this building, as well as in the context of the street?
Well, an area form documenting the whole subdivision and an individual, what's called a Mass Historical Commission building form has been prepared for this house. I suspect you haven't seen any of this material. So this house was built in the 1890s, and it was initially owned by absentee landlords, and the design of the house suggests it was built in a way that could accommodate either one or two families or one family with borders. And it's typical of the rest of the houses from the initial build in the 1890s that fill this neighborhood. So it was rented to tenants for a short time, and then it was acquired by an African-American family. And I'm afraid I don't have a lot of the details in front of me right at the moment, but all of this material is available. It's been submitted to MHC, and I can get it for you. But it was owned by this family for about 20 years. The head of the family worked as a Pullman porter in the railroads, which was something of an elite position in that group, that community. And the children, after the deaths of the parents in the 1920s, the children had moved out and sold the building to subsequent owners who were also absentee landlords, but lived in the neighborhood and owned it for another, until recently. So I hope that answers that question. It's part of a fairly significant, historically significant neighborhood that was the home of Winchester's African-American community for
The mention of the
early 20th century.
And the mention of the street and the surroundings, what are you trying to restore here? Like what is the context there?
We are trying to preserve these types of buildings, of which there are a large number on the 2 blocks of Harvard and Irving. The neighborhood is generally well preserved. And so, as you can see from the photograph, you can see that this is what we call an end house. It's a Queen Anne style. And it follows a pattern that you find throughout this neighborhood.
Thank you.
Does the board have any other questions of John? Go ahead, please.
I'm curious, John, have you discussed with the developer the floor-to-floor heights? And I'm just looking at what's new and what's existing, and I'm not clear about whether or not the windows they're proposing are smaller or if the floor-to-floor heights have changed.
We've provided a set of conditions to the developer that address just about every aspect of building fabric that we could think of, including trim, siding, openings, doors, windows, porches, and the house is, although in difficult condition, it's very well preserved and has most of its original or early building fabric. The porch was probably altered early in the history of the building. So what we focused on is keeping all of these aspects of the building, the siding, the trim, and the idea is to replace it in kind. It's all there. We can see what it looks like. And, these things are listed in a set of conditions that I think, Brian, you've provided that to the planning board.
Yeah, I can get it up on the screen in just a second.
It's just a list of conditions that addresses all of these issues, including window casings, window size, door size, rake boards, siding. You'll notice from the photograph that there's stepped shingles in the gable that, we'll want to have duplicated. And the rest of the building is sided and wood clapboard.
Ryan, will you be sending this to us as a document?
We already have that.
This has been sent out.
I did, yeah, I'm sorry I missed it. Thank
That's
you.
okay. I can, yeah.
I have another question for John. I'm curious about the new addition. So it seems like there's a rectangular addition in the back, and that is the new portion, right? And so I wonder what the Historical Commission had thought about it being in plane with the original building, so that and the roof looks like it. In additions and in historic preservation, I would think that you would want to highlight what the addition is. And it seems like with the addition being in the same plane as the original building, as well as the roof, it just looks like it was original when it isn't. You know what I'm saying? So this driveway side facade.
Yeah, the idea of the addition is that it's in the rear of the building and doesn't generally impact on the front or side elevations. I think has to be some flexibility with that elevation of the building in the rear. There is the National Register and the Park Service. It has a notion that additions should be distinguished from the original building fabric in general. So, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the Historical Commission's contemplated exactly how to do that yet, but
it's just an offset from that plane. There's the bathroom just
from the left side, you mean?
Right. Would indicate that it's a separate piece.
That may be one way to distinguish it, or to put some trim that separates out that section of the elevation. Again, it's I think the commission has tried to be flexible about additions in the rear in an effort to keep these buildings viable. Mm-hmm. So that's the general idea. So how we can kind of point that out. There may be a tweak that we can do to the design on that side of the house, but frankly, I think we want to keep the general feeling of the building and its look from the street, at the same time giving the owner an economically viable way to restore it or renovate it. Mm-hmm. And I think that that need is answered pretty much with this plan. Again, you can call out the addition with some trim or other detail.
Sally, you had your hand up a while ago.
Well, I have a question about the planning board's role in this, in the development of this property, which includes the new house on the same land. So my understanding is the planning board advocated for a new zoning bylaw, which passed town meeting. And this is one of the early uses of that new zoning bylaw, which is dependent on historic preservation of the original house exterior to the conditions of the historical commission, and dependent on the design of the second home that will be put on this property, which is made possible by this waiver. And as long as the historical commission provides very clear conditions for the exterior of the original home and clear conditions for the exterior of the new home, and that all the setbacks are otherwise attended to, or if they're not, they're part of the application for a waiver to the zoning board of appeals, all of the, and that there be a preservation restriction placed on the property, that as long as all of those things are in place, I'm not sure that what the zoning board has purview over, particularly with regards to whether it's an accurate historic restoration or not, and whether the new house is an accurate historic reproduction or not. And other than that, I don't really understand what the planning board's role in the development of this property as a first use of the new zoning bylaw, what our role is.
Brian,
I can answer that. Yeah, let me,
yeah, pop that up, please.
here it is. So I'll make it a little bigger, but so we need to submit a report, written recommendations.
Brian, if you are showing us something other
Oh.
than the,
How about now?
thank you, that's much
Sorry.
better.
4521. So we need to submit recommendations showing the appropriateness of the design of the new structure as it relates to the resource. That's A. Then an evaluation of the proposed development and whether it makes sense for the neighborhood in terms of the location of the house and that type of thing. And then a recommendation of granting or denial, including conditions. So this is really no different than a special permit, other than the historical commission, design review, and planning board are called out very specifically. It's not just not just like all boards and committees for special permit, where it's usually about 10 or 11 different boards, committees, or people, like health director, fire department, DPW, that type of thing. So this is just so that's why they're here. It's like before we go to the zoning board, we want to say, hey, are there any? They're trying to see, is there anything that we should, that for instance, if the sentiment of the board was that 2 doors is fine, then they would probably go forward with 2 doors. If they said 1 door was not at all, what Mr. Clemson said from the historical commission was that, frankly, that who really knows, but it seems possible. But so they're here to try to find out what you feel. I think that really is, to be honest, the only real kind of larger sticking point. I think the rest seems to be like it can be worked out, but that's kind of more of a larger point.
That's really helpful, Brian. Thank you. So in fact, it is within the purview of the planning board to discuss specific sticking points in the design, the proposed design of the restoration of the historic building. Is that right? It's within
Correct.
Okay.
Definitely. And conditions can be imposed. I can make this a little bigger for people.
So Diab, now that I have that clarification, is it the task now for each of the planning board members to weigh in on the design?
I think there is so the planning board will officially weigh in on this design when it has been submitted. So this is essentially a pre-application hearing so that the developers get a sense of what they might need to do, because we'd like to get what's coming in to be pretty much final so that we don't have a lot of back and forth. So So if the board has particular opinions upon things, now would be a good time to state them, or if you feel like you need more time to study this, that would also be a good thing to know. But this
Okay.
is this is a feedback loop right now.
Great. This is
Can I ask Mr. Clemson to comment on the options that are in the proposal? Sorry, Sally.
no, no,
thought
I'm
I-
happy that you're taking
that's-
over.
That's more a clarification.
Very happy that you are.
Thank you. There are in the plans 3 options for the proposed attic space, as well as, yeah. So we're talking about the 3rd floor. There's a lot of discrepancies that I'm seeing between the elevations and the proposed options, having to do with the attic and the basement. And I think this goes back to what I Ching is talking about in terms of adding to the historic, the volume of the historic house, which I think is, you know, could do the house a lot of good or be harmful in some respects. So
May I?
there are 3 options to the attic space, but
May,
Right.
may
thank
I?
you.
Yeah.
Well-
I'm not sure if there's a question that's been asked yet.
Oh, may I say something?
I was actually posing the question to the historic board and John Clemson, please.
Okay.
Correct,
Yeah.
but we just, one remark, that's not supposed to be in here. There's a mistake, there's not 3 options, there's 1 option. That was an overlook on my apologies. With it being passed around, I sent an older one through. There's only, 2 out of these 3 we deemed not.
When the architect was drawing this up, they gave us a couple of options. There should only be 1 option for the attic.
Which is
Front
it?
of you.
Which one?
I'm not even, how many options are you looking at? Hold on.
Same thing we're looking at.
We should do this in person.
So here's the existing attic is here.
That's the existing.
And then there's 2 of the 3 that were given to us.
Well, there's a 3rd one too with the deck.
Right. This is 2 of the 3 that let's figure out if one of these is it. And then if it's not, there's the 3rd one. Sean and Brendan, do you happen to know if either of these ones that you're looking at are the correct one? They look shockingly similar, but not the same due to this room here
I can't move around the screen.
and the closet. You can't. It's me.
Right.
So it's those 2 or this one.
It looks like the exterior expression of those 3 plans would be the same.
Correct. Absolutely correct. The only difference between those 3 plans is the interior, not the exterior.
I disagree.
Except for,
I disagree too, Cheryl. Thank you.
Option
looking-
3,
okay.
option 3 has a very different
Correct.
impact on the
You-
left
you
elevation.
shouldn't be looking at option 3.
Okay, option 3 is out of the discussion.
Correct.
Thank you.
So let me be clear then, just to chime in with another voice. So your current option requires a 2-story plus addition on the back?
The existing house, 2-story with the attic and an addition on the back, correct.
And the addition would be essentially a two-story addition?
2-story addition going all the way up to the attic.
Okay.
So in this set of plans, sorry, Diab,
Nope,
these
go
are
ahead.
all shown as existing walls.
Okay.
So how is that possible if we have an addition on the back?
Don't know.
So Cheryl, can you direct us to specific drawing numbers?
Well, here, if we're looking at the proposed first floor that shows new walls here, right, Cheryl? This is what you're saying. So these are all dark line are existing walls. The shaded are the new. And looking from here all the way down to any of the attic plans, you can see here. We'll go immediately. So get this in your eye, and then now to here, these are all existing walls. So Cheryl's like, "What's going on here?"
Right, I see that now, Cheryl. Thank you.
So I think that the fact that the addition would be 2.5 stories does speak to the necessity of somehow making a transition from it to the original structure, because that is a significant mass addition to the back of the building, which I think will affect how one views it as well. Excuse me, somebody's shooting fireworks off.
So
Wh-
do you, can I ask John a question about this standard from the Mass Historical Commission?
Sure.
Um, Which and to me, just for clarification, the standard from the Mass Historical Commission is that when there's an addition on a historic structure, it is the wish of Mass Historic Commission that such addition not look like it's always been there, but that it is clearly a period addition. Is that right, John?
Yes, generally, yeah, the idea is that in 50 or 100 years, you look at the building and it'll be obvious, fairly obvious that the addition isn't part of the original building.
Okay, so as long as it's
that's the idea.
consonant with, but you know, not like an offensive addition to, but clearly distinct from. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, there may be any number of ways to accomplish that.
That's very helpful.
I think there's sometimes concern that additions to buildings, while they're distinctive from the original building, also harmonize appropriately with the original building. So there's, it takes a little bit of thought to sort of arrive at that solution. Right?
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would argue that the rendering in the cover page, right, would suggest what they're doing now is it's the same material and it's just an extrusion. So the addition is actually an extrusion of the original form. So if, like you said, John, if they could, distinguish it with a different material, I think an offset would help. I know the ridge, it would be nice to keep that ridge, but if it were just offset so that it was offset from that facade, and somebody in 50 years could read that and say, oh, that was not the original building. That was added on. I think that would help a lot in what you're trying to identify here as a historic resource. It would just be a clearer reading of this architectural piece.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Can I just make another comment about the drawings? And I realize now, Mr. Lyons or whoever is here representing this design, that we may be looking at an older set of documents, but I myself agree with what board is bringing forward in terms of the addition, but even the drawings are not representing, there's no accuracy in, for instance, the extrusion and the roof. If you go to the elevations, Brian, and the roof plan, it's just extremely confusing. The roof plan on 14 appears to have an addition at the back because of the line that's drawn between the existing and the new. And then in the elevations on 15, additionally on the left elevation, there seems to be a line coming down the facade, the side of the elevation that seems to suggest that there's a change between the existing building and the new addition, and the roof is not showing a change. So essentially, I don't understand the drawings, and it's difficult to if these are the documents that we're we're making our decision and our approval of, then they're just not, they're not accurate enough to be able to approve, honestly.
Yeah, and I agree. I just want to back up what Cheryl just said. For instance, if you look at the right elevation on the upper right of this, of what's in front of us, the two vertical lines in the middle of the structure, I believe, are supposed to indicate that that is proud of the main facade.
Right.
So it implies depth, but the line below it on the, if you scroll down, please, Brian, the line below it here would indicate the same thing, yet the 3D extrusion indicates that it's flat. So I think it would be really helpful if we could have a discussion with the architect present so that we better understand what these drawings are telling us.
And I would also encourage John to really check with everyone in the design, on the design team, about the size of the windows and the doors. Honestly, if I see the photograph, which I really appreciate that on the cover of this document set, if I look at that and I look at the distance between the top of the door or window to the next floor, or the floor itself, the proportions are entirely different.
Yeah.
There's I think that these are much shorter doors. That's, you know, that's probably a more contemporary approach to putting in mechanical systems there. Yeah, there's all kinds of ways in which this is, you know, it's meeting code. I don't doubt, except maybe in the basement. If that's going to be an apartment, I doubt that you're going to meet code with the windows at a sort of, you know, just above grade. That's pretty tough. I would suggest that you contact your architect about that as a program. But I would say that the proportions here are really not in line with the existing building.
Can I add to that?
No, go ahead, yes.
On drawing A109, Brian, you will see that there is a dashed line in the new roof to be built that is a little bit faint in the rendering or the drawing, but it indicates a hip roof structure to the front of the building and the back of the building. And in fact, none of the elevations show a hip roof. And so that was really confusing to me, because if you look at the elevations, it's not a hip roof. It's two, you know, straight up and down dormers on the front and the back of the building. So I just would second everything that Cheryl said about the drawing set, and say that it needs to be checked perhaps. And I also noticed that sheet A111, Brian, if you scroll down to that one, I think it's the one above, is for a completely different project and a completely different client. And so it's not actually intended to be part of this drawing set. And then I would also say, in support of Cheryl's comment, that I thought this was supposed to be a two-family house, and I did not think that the basement was designed to be habitable space, because I don't know if means of egress have been provided there up to the most recent International Building Code standards. And then with regards to the double front door, I would urge the Historic Commission to not provide that, not agree that that is an acceptable modification to the exterior of the building. The historic structure would not read as a historic structure in my view, with a double front door. But I defer to the Historic Commission in that regard. Those are my comments.
If I could chime in just for a second, I have a couple of comments. One of which, Brian, if you could bring up the elevation for the left side. The thing I noticed on the thing I noticed there is that the dimensions of the windows seem to be smaller than on the right side.
Mhm.
And I would think that if you scroll up, Brian, you'll see the right elevation. To my eye, those are much larger, and the windows should be comparable on all of the sides of the house, because historically they would have been. They would all have been, as far as I could tell, a single size. The other question I have is in regards to the placement of the stairs on the sides of the house. Those are, I presume, the secondary egress from the apartments or from the units. And so the question I have is I think it detracts from the existing house. The existing house doesn't have that. And I'm wondering if there is any way of putting that on the back. Because I think that's the historical house didn't have those. And they are very visible just from looking down the driveway. So what I'm getting from the sense of the board is that we certainly have some issues with the placement of windows and doors. But overall, the biggest problem seems to be that these drawings are not accurate. And they do not reflect, perhaps they don't reflect the design that you want to present, but they certainly don't reflect anything, or they're not at a stage where we can look at them and understand what it is we're looking at. There are some, as have been pointed out, some significant issues with them. So
Can I bring up one other point, Diab?
sure.
Which is that the planning board has discussed in the past using the insights of a historic preservation architect to advise us. And I don't know how we execute that intention, but this seems like an opportunity for us to benefit from such a thing.
So
that could be that could be a recommendation to, to the application that when we receive it, for example, that it goes through the ZBA. So it could be a recommendation for them to hire someone to do that if that's for this specific process.
Right.
Would it be the ZBA or would it be the Historical Commission in pursuit of their confirmation of meeting conditions?
I think it would be the ZBA only because they would be the SPGA in that role. So yeah.
I see. Thank you.
So is the board Brian Mentor, you are here presumably to discuss this project with us. Do you have anything that you wanted to say?
Yes, thank you, Diab. I just want to bring it to the applicant's attention, the requirement of, or the increase of impervious surface. And the town of Winchester has a threshold of 250 square feet. And looking at the addition as it's proposed right now, it looks like you're proposing to do about 216 square feet of impervious surface. So you fall below the threshold of having to mitigate stormwater. So just so you're aware that if you do modifications to your project and that you've got 33 square feet of impervious surface to play with, well, if you go above the 250 square feet, you'll be required to mitigate stormwater runoff, which would require like an infiltration system and test pits and things of that nature. The one final comment that I have is with respect to the size stairs. It's unclear, reviewing the drawings, it's unclear the nature of those stairs, if they have a riser along with the tread. So if it doesn't have a riser, I would say that would not be included as impervious surface. But if it does have a riser, then then you're probably going to be pretty close to exceeding that 250 square foot threshold.
Brian, do you know if there is some requirement that you have a riser for stairs that high? Is there a safety concern?
Oh, well, just with a riser, so you have your tread. But if you don't have the riser, sometimes these exterior stairs are like just have a tread on them.
Right.
So water can just fall down through the stairway, and it's not like an impervious surface. If there's
Understood.
a riser there, the water will cascade down and collect at the foot of the stairs.
Yeah, understood. I was just wondering whether there was a safety issue if you have a 2-story or a 1-story stairs with no riser to prevent your foot from going forward.
Yeah, it doesn't meet code, actually. You make a good point, Diab. You need to have the riser closed in order to meet code.
So in
So-
fact, would that push it over the threshold of the impervious?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
what he
it's
was
looking
saying.
like it.
Okay, so, okay.
So I think, has the board exhausted itself in comments?
Well, the only other thing I have is that 2 sets of plans were submitted. One for the restoration of the existing historic structure, and the other set of plans called New 2-Family Dwelling House, 88B Harvard Street, was also submitted to the planning board. And so it seems to be kind of like a replication of what would be the restored version of 88. And I'm just wondering, is that the intent and the plan? And if so, will all the above comments apply to both?
That was the direction that the board had given the Lions. That's probably what would have gone there in the first place. It probably would have been a house that it was right about the same size, about the same scale, at the same distance from the street. It was made for it. So we basically said, that makes sense. So that's why they would be doing it. As for your second question, I would have, that's up to you. I would imagine so. Whatever, if it's trying to be a house, it's a question of how much you want it to be exactly the same, or as the first house, whatever it's restored to, or not.
So I would say that if the goal of the whole historic resource preservation is even with this waiver and permission to add a structure as the subdivision, if the goal is to preserve the character of the historic resource, which is the whole street, then it would seem to me that it would be very much in the interest of that goal if the new structure, 88B, according to these plans, carries through all of the design decisions that are made to the restoration of the historic structure. It would be, then it would look like it belongs there. It would be part of this whole community. And I'm very much in favor of preserving what, I don't know if it's appropriate to call it the worker housing historic inventory of our town, but it's a really important part of our community. And to that extent, that's why I would think that 88B would have the same conditions applied to it.
So, Anne, I see your hand up. I will get to you in a few moments. If the board is willing to move on to 88B in their discussion, or do we want to get whatever this is, 88 to
It's 8:33, and we were supposed to start on the town meeting articles at 8:05.
right.
So do we make a recommendation for favorable action with conditions? Is this what we're trying to get at?
I think, well, we don't have.
This is before that. This is before. Yeah.
This is since this is
Talking it over.
yeah, this is a pre-application meeting. We're just essentially giving a data dump to the developers so they know where the board is. I think that personally, I think discussions of 88B in terms of how it looks, I really would like to see an improvement on 88, both in terms of the quality of the documents we're getting and perhaps addressing some of the issues that we've discussed. I would love to see the architect come in so we can discuss these with the architect to get a better understanding of what is intended through these documents. And at that point, I think once we've, I mean, 88 is the gem, and we need to get that right. And the discussions about 88B, I think, follow after we've understood what's happening to 88. So at this point, I think that we can conclude this discussion.
Right.
And I'll give Ann Sarah, she had her hand up for a while, so I'll give her a chance to say something. But-
I just wanted to point out
Wait,
that.
hold on, Ann, sorry, we're not there yet. I'll let you know when you're getting there. I just want to make sure the board, what we're going to, I think what we'll do is we'll invite the Lions to come back. Brian and I will discuss with them when's a good time to come back and what other things the board would expect, if that's okay with the planning board.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and Ann, now please, Ann Sarah, please identify yourself and tell us where you live. I apologize, we're supposed to ask everyone to do that.
And Sarah, 5 Andrea Circle. I just wanted to point out that someone just said that we have a 250 square foot threshold. We don't. We might have one after fall meeting, but we do not have that right now. And some of us would like to see that threshold go down to 0 and also be expanded for projects that are not involved with building permits, but somehow have some sort of an authority that deals with impervious area on every lot. Some other municipalities have that. But I just want to point out that that does not currently exist. So I think that it wasn't correct to present it that way. Thanks.
Well, and the person who said that was actually the assistant town engineer. And I'm gonna make the assumption that he has a good idea of the regulations. But if that's not the case, we can review that.
It's before, am I muted? It's before it's one of the things that you'll be discussing tonight. One of the town meeting proposals. It's not adopted yet.
I'm not sure what you're talking about right now, Ann.
Okay,
but
well, you'll see it.
We will move
And I
on to
think
the
that
town meeting articles.
I don't think it's a town meeting article that's being put forward by the planning board.
Is it? Okay, so,
That's true, right. Sally's right.
right, so I don't know how to deal with this disagreement about the regulations. Brian, if you could just reassure us that the 250 feet is there.
Sure. So there's as always, the answer is actually somewhere in the middle. So basically, anything that's before the zoning board of appeals, whether it's site plan review, special permit, variance, whatever it is, anything that's before the zoning board of appeals, when it goes through engineering, that is their internal number that they use to require drainage. What Ann Sarah is talking about is that, well, what about the regular building permit that does not go through the ZBA? She's correct. There is nothing on the books that is when there's a building permit. So that's the discrepancy. So they're kind of both right.
Okay. Yes, I like the fact everyone's correct. So Ann, your point is well taken. Brian, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you,
Brian,
Brian.
the Y, thank you for your holding us to the internal building department requirements. I think we are done here, unless there is something that someone wants to say to close this session. Brian and I will get in touch with the Lions, and we will move forward. And so thank you, John Clemson, for being able to attend our discussion this evening. And I'm sure that we will be hearing from you or someone else from the Historical Commission on this property in the future. Thank you to the Lions for attending. And we are now going to move on to town meeting articles. So what we have before us, to clarification for those who are wondering what we're talking about, the planning board has a public hearing on town meeting articles coming up on August 31st. Brian, do you happen to have that announcement or something like that, which lists the articles we'll be discussing?
Sure, yeah, I'll get that up in just a second. Are you seeing it now?
Yes, we're seeing it now. So the first one, which was to amend the floodplain overlay district, is, I believe, the one that Ansara was referring to, but that is not something that the planning board will be discussing tonight, because that's essentially engineering is control of, is managing that that particular warrant article.
Sorry, Dieb, just to interrupt very quickly.
Sure.
I have a note about that, in that we are going to be getting in our packets this Friday the bylaw that's from Anderson and Krieger, so from our legal counsel. So we're actually going to get that. That's when we're going to receive it for our 31st meeting, which basically is trying to marry our existing bylaw and this new bylaw referencing new regulations. The idea is that we are going to be, rather than making hundreds of little changes, we're scrapping the existing bylaw and doing a new one. And that's where legal counsel is taking over for that. So that'll be in your packets on Friday.
That's great.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
That's really helpful.
So the other two motions were to our reassessment of the definition of half-story, and an amendment of setbacks in the center business district to provide relief when the center business district abutted a residential area where currently there is a 0 setback requirement. And we did not, I'd like to get number 3 out of the way. If we are not going to pursue that, then we can, because we haven't had a real discussion about that. And the first step in trying to understand that was to see whether or not there are any residential properties which would be affected by a 0 setback in the CBD. And the history of this came up because when we looked, or when the Fells Hardware 654 Main Street site was developed, the setback with respect to the neighboring property on Vine Street, where there was a 0, is it called a 0 clearance setback, Brian? Remind me what the terminology is.
0 line, just a 0 setback or a 0 line.
A 0 setback. And so they were able, if they, to put a building right up against on the property line, which seems a little, which seems improper in my view. So I know, Sally, you had done some research on this to see whether there was any existing properties where this would be an effect.
Well, I did. I sent you and Brian an email that had a little graphic cut out of our town zoning map. And I enumerated the specific other zoning districts that immediately abut the central business district. And I had said, I don't have the tools or the skills to identify the specific addresses, but I listed streets. Right. And I said that the way to determine if the number of properties that would be impacted by this, and in my opinion, it would be a positive impact for those properties to have a greater setback, needs to be figured out by a person or persons who can just sit down and look at the actual property maps like, um,
Right.
like with regards to the zoning map, like what Brian has up now. I don't know if that's the zoning map or is it just the assessor's map?
Yeah, this is just town GIS. I was just bringing
Right.
up the exact property. So just so some, I mean, we all kind of know what we're talking about here, but just for those that don't know exactly what we were talking about is the side setback for 63 Vine, considering that this was a facade. So this is a front, and there was also a front here. This is considered a side setback. So the building can go right up against this property, even though this property 51 is not in the center business district. So this was the issue.
So Brian, do you have the email that I sent that has that picture that I pasted into the email?
Yeah, I didn't have that queued up, but I can get that.
So
Yeah.
I think that we definitely need help from engineering to go over the zoning map and to do the identification of the exact properties. My personal opinion is that this is not ripe for this town meeting. It's definitely certainly not. We don't have language that we can present next Tuesday, and the language. And so I think that this is something I personally think we need to do it to protect these neighborhoods, but we should put it on our spring agenda. And this board, I think, can simply vote to not proceed with it. Brian will tell us the exact words that we would need in order to withdraw or
It would be
indefinite postponement.
indefinitely postponed, or actually, this is before it actually is to withdraw. Well, we actually haven't voted this onto the warrant yet, but I think it would be a withdrawal, because not an indefinitely postponed, because it's
Right, we would
technically it's not on the warrant yet.
Yeah, it's listed in the legal notice, but we're not ready to present it for the warrant.
Right.
Correct.
And I think it would be great to have the engineering department's help in actually enumerating the specific properties that would be impacted by this change in bylaw. And obviously it would include, I guess it's 51 Vine, but there are others, of course, if you look at that picture that I put into my memo.
Yeah, I mean, the key is this would not affect existing projects, obviously. They would be granted.
Right, there's some law about how much time after a bylaw is voted in that previously in discussion projects are impacted. Is that right?
Yeah, there's Brian knows the language on that. But if the board is in agreement, we will just move this to spring. And I think we just need to voice vote. I don't even know if we need to vote on this. We just won't move it forward to the warrant. I think Brian, we still have to vote on putting things on the warrant, correct?
That is correct. We would still, and we would just not vote this into the warrant. So
Okay.
But I think we're still not going to be talking about this on the 31st. If that is the case, there should be a vote to withdraw this, just to withdraw it, because on the 31st, it's going to be expected that we're going to have a presentation and talk about this when we're not.
Okay, so is there a motion to withdraw this from our public hearing? Is that good enough?
Totally.
Okay, so is there a motion to withdraw the, what are we going to call this? We need to give it a name. Redrawing of the CBD setbacks, neighboring residential districts.
Or you could just say the Third Amendment.
The Third Amendment, which I just learned has something to do with harboring troops in your house. But that's the U.S. Constitution.
The planning board's proposed Third Amendment with the history lesson aside on that one.
In any case,
I would so move that we withdraw from our August 31st legal notice the intention to present to town meeting in the spring the third item on the legal notice.
Excellent. And is there a second?
A second.
Okay, Eaching seconds. Roll call vote, please. Cheryl Wolf.
Aye.
Eaching Scott.
Aye.
Sally Dale,
I,
Diab aye, 4-0, so decided. Okay, so what's left for us to discuss this evening is the half-story definition. I don't know if there have been any updates since our last discussion.
Yes.
Then why don't I turn it over to the important parties?
I defer
So-
to I Ching, although I do
Okay.
want to say that in the handout that went out with the package, the number 2 item should have been crossed out. No, not that number 2. I Ching, you'll clarify.
I try to replicate the text in with the graphics,
That's the one.
but yeah, there in the last paragraph there, story half or half story, proposed new language. Number 2, the height of half story measured from floor to exterior ridge line. That whole thing should be crossed out or just deleted.
Okay, so Brian, are you about to do that in real time?
I thought I did that in the previous one, but it just, for some reason, did not get, but yeah.
That's a PDF, so
Yeah.
we can just go forward, and then I deleted it with the graphic.
Okay, so why don't we make sure that it is correct as by the time it gets into the packet this Friday.
For sure,
So-
yep.
So let's scroll on to the next page then, please.
Okay. So, we to recap everything, we are trying to clarify the dimensional and massing calculations and goals of half stories. And one other objective was to ensure harmony with the size and scale of the surrounding built environment for new construction and alterations. So in this graphic here, we are identifying what our current language is, which is for a half story. So it is the points of regulation are that the definition of a half story would be a story under a sloping roof, that's one, with points of intersection at the bottom of the rafters and interior faces of walls are less than 3 feet above the floor level on at least 2 exterior walls. So in this graphic, we are indicating a couple of examples. They're not historically accurate. So the top gambrel roof and just a pitched roof on the second part are all both legal because they follow the identifications of being under sloping roof as well as less than 3 feet with that intersection. And so the problem herein is that then, it's not fully regulated. It can be a whole bunch of different sizes. And we're trying to figure out how to more accurately regulate what we want to see. And this is just a 2.5 story example. So if we go down, so the proposed language would be to keep the top definition. So the bottom of the roof rafters intersect in the interior faces, it'll not more than 3 feet above the floor of the half story. So the second part that we want to insert would be to regulate the massing. I think we're trying to regulate that. So the total, we're trying to add that the total floor area, so that this calculation of floor area of the upper floor above 7 feet cannot be more than 65% of the total square footage of the building footprint. So the entire building footprint. So in this example here, the half story is maybe the original portion of the building, and then the entire footprint is with an addition, say, to like an 1890s building. So in this example, we're calculating X is the total floor area with clear height about 7 feet, including the dormer here. And then the Y, the denominator, would be the total floor area of the building footprint. So X over Y cannot be greater than 65%. So that's what we're trying to do. And in the last image, and we had a big discussion about how perhaps roof expression, if that might limit some of the roof expression. So for example, in the first left example here is what we were talking about, sort of rafter meets wall 3 feet. So it's a fairly like squat little roof going on there. And the calculation is based on 65% of a 40 by 40 footprint of a building. So this was a way to maybe hack it and to see what kind of like roof expressions we could do and what breaks it and what might be possible. And this is not sort of an aesthetic decision or aesthetic test. And certainly we don't have A-frames in Winchester and any that I know of, but these are sort of some of the ways that you could still get that 65%, but have different roof expressions. So for the second example, the rafter meets the wall at 0 feet. And then if you wanted a higher slope, say, you can make the rafter meet the wall at lower than the floor here. You see, you get that like nice peak, and you still get the 65% there. Because that calculation is such that fits. And then if I just wanted to take it to like the extremes, like say the roof meets the ground, like an A-frame. And so in that case, you would still calculate the percentage above 7 feet as a numerator, and the denominator would still be the footprint. And in this case, it would be less than 65%, unless you really, just move the ridge above, excess of 40 feet, which would be kind of a really silly looking building. So there's that. And then the last one I wanted to kind of test to see what this how this definition could break. Like say if you wanted a what is that called? This is not a beautiful building here, but like what do you call that? A penthouse. Say you wanted a penthouse, right? Like and what would that look like, and how does that? And I was trying to figure out what the definition meant. So that like 3 feet, where like the perimeter wall could be offset from like the footprint perimeter somehow, right? So you could get a little patio or something up there, but it seems like it demands a peaked roof. Like there's no way to really get a flat roof building in this definition. And is that somehow then not a great law because we're preventing the expression of flat roofs in town? I mean, is that what we're trying to do here? But I don't know, Cheryl, if you could like hack it somehow to get a flat roof with these two definitions. But I mean, this was like midnight, so I don't know. My mind wasn't like fully functioning.
Midnight, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole, I don't know that you could get a flat roof.
That's so funny. Like why, is that really what we want to do with these laws?
Can you get a half story with a flat roof?
It doesn't seem like it.
But I mean, the only way you do that is if you essentially created a third story, which was essentially, let's take your penthouse and just take that little rectangle in the middle and call that your structure. That would be your flat roof. So you would have a wedding cake design, rather ugly wedding cake, but you'd have one.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to see it. That's the whole point of being like offset and having a penthouse, is that you wouldn't see it from the ground.
So I'm really curious to hear what Cheryl has to say, but I just want to go into the word hack. What you were doing with this, trying to test out what could be achieved with the revised definition, is to see what exactly could be achieved. That's what hack is, right?
Yeah, or trying to break it. Just trying to see like how someone might take advantage of these laws and like do something that we didn't intend.
Okay.
Yeah, so we could, well, wait, Cheryl's been asked a question, so why don't we let Cheryl answer the question if she wants to?
I love these. I think you did a great job.
You
And,
did.
and hacking is definitely was in the back of my mind as well, as only for some reason I didn't use these this information as much as I went back and looked at your research that you guys started with. So earlier today, I was looking at all the other towns and what they do. This is really kind of saying, let's test what's possible here. If in fact, what's most important to us is that we have some impact on design. And then you challenged yourself by saying, is a flat roof all that bad? Like, can we say that a contemporary house in Winchester is a bad thing? Because I've seen some things that have happened in Belmont, around the lake. You know, there are things that with the right materials, that is contextual, that, you know, where do we control this? So I'm more in the camp of the simpler we make this, the better. And hacking it means we've tried to, like, we've written the email 15 times and now we're down to one sentence, right? Because we know what we're up against. So I have to say I really appreciate all of it. But I did do a few diagrams of my own based on the other towns. And you know, the more we write into it, the more we will get hacked. And the more that we write less, the more we have control over what we approve and we don't approve. Like, that really wasn't the intent, right? Does everybody kind of?
That seems counterintuitive. Could you explain that?
So if I look at what Newton has to say, right? And I know Newton is like, if you go up against Newton to build a house, you know, it's going to take you a while. They're tough. They're like, you know, they've got the gloves on all the time. So Newton says a story directly under a sloping roof where the area with a ceiling height of 7 feet or greater is less than 2/3 of the area of the story next below. So that kind of cuts out, that eliminates a couple of your hacks, right? Because the story below is very much saying that you have exterior walls that hold up a roof, and everything in that roof. I have a problem with the 7 feet because I think it's going to allow developers to use really low-pitched roofs. But I feel like, you know, the footprint of a house, depending on the site, is very elastic. So the Newton half story is pretty sweet and simple. The Lexington half story talks about dormers, and I was of interest in that because it says that a dormer can't be more than 50% of the length of a roof from pitch down. So that has a whole different sort of design. It says sloping roofs do not exceed 50% of the length of the sloping roof to which it is attached. Sorry, the rafters of the sloping roof does not exceed 50% of the length of the sloping roof to which it is attached. So I wanted to bring that up as a
Are you talking about this, the pitch? Is that a prescription about pitch?
It's, yes, to a certain degree, Sally, but more it has to do with when I see one of the hacks that I Ching drew had a dormer on it.
That was the example, the page 2 of 3.
Oh, okay, sorry. And that's where, you know, you can have a really low slope to a roof and then put these dormers in that go almost to the ridge, right?
Right.
And it encourages it encourages this type of dormer rather than a pitched dormer, right?
So
And-
this is, Cheryl, this is really helpful because this is what I was saying way back in the beginning of this conversation, like 4 meetings ago, that definitions of half story, the definition of half story is intertwined with regulations regarding dormers. And I think we have a regulation about dormers that the intersection of the dormer roof must be below the ridge,
Right.
and the face of the dormer must be inside the lower story facade. And so, but I totally agree with what you're saying about that. If we say that the 65% is calculated using a denominator of the entire footprint of the building, the consequence of that is to encourage builders to make shallow pitched roofs. And one of the appealing characteristics of the historic architecture of Winchester is that we don't have shallow roofs, shallow pitched roofs. We have steeper, and I'm sure in architecture there's a way to articulate the numerically articulate the pitch of the roof, but by including the entire footprint versus what Newton does, which is the immediately below that attic space or that half story space.
But I don't.
Yeah.
If I could just interject real quickly, doesn't it go the opposite direction? If we increase the Y, that means you can have a larger X, and you can get to larger X by having a more pitched roof. The shallower a roof, the smaller the 60. So Brian, if you could scroll up to the next page, please.
We have a 40-foot height limit.
Right, but within that limit, no, the page below, sorry, go to that one right there. Right, so in order to increase the amount of space, you go with the same. Let's take number 2, where rafter meets wall at 0%. The taller, the more pitched that roof is, the larger there is area in that attic, which is below 7 feet. If I bring the pitch of that roof down, I reduce the amount of area that's below 7 feet. So by using the footprint of the house, you're providing them with the ability to make the roof more pitched rather than less pitched.
I agree with you, Diab. So Cheryl, I don't know. So last time we presented it with the Y as a calculation of the floor below the half story, and that just got too confusing in some ways, right? I mean, we thought I'm not sure the relationship between the Y and the pitch. Like, why is it a shallower pitch that we're encouraging here?
Well, what I was wondering and diagramming is the 7 feet or greater.
Yeah.
Right. So if you say that you need the 3 feet where the rafter meets the exterior wall, I mean, you're breaking that rule when I go to the right here.
Yeah, no, we want to less than that, 3 feet or less than. So you do. I mean, yes, if you want to have a steeper pitch, you just go less than 3 feet.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends upon how much space you can get. So giving a person the larger footprint of the house allows them to have a larger space, in which case the easiest way to do that is to increase the pitch.
Except that you might be up to the 40-foot limit. And at that point, you get to
but then you're hitting a limit. It's going to be a huge house regardless.
40 feet is really, really tall.
Yeah, so if you cannot get to your 65% by raising the ridge up to 40 feet, there's absolutely nothing you can do to get to that 65%.
But the 65%, I think what we're talking about is whether the 65% should be calculated based on the story immediately, the floor immediately below, or the entire building footprint. And I think entire building footprint opens up kind of a can of worms, because you could have a rambling house. You could have a house built to the setback. We see it all
Well,
the time.
if you want to use the floor below, and the floor below is smaller than the footprint, in order to get your 65%, you are then going to have a less steep roof.
Right. And
And I thought we decided we didn't like flat, these squat looking roofs.
yeah, and I think that it was having my house of cards collapse, that I thought that if we used the entire building footprint, that it would be a steeper roof.
It would be a steeper roof if you use the entire building footprint.
Right, no,
because-
I'm sorry, I said it backwards from what I was confused about. I'm sorry, now I'm really confused.
I mean, I guess the question is, does this make it better than it was before?
Well, go back to the goals, I Ching and Brian. The goals of this exercise are,
So I think it does clarify it, because I think it is clearer about it. Nothing, the current language does not prevent large roofs.
what's a large roof? High?
Well-
Like the one we saw on Wedgemere, right? Cheryl, were you there when we saw that garage roof?
Yeah, it's
19, was it 19?
It was a 1.5 story, right, garage. So, but it was like a 30-foot tall building, and it was totally within rights to build that tall,
Right.
except for
So-
the fact that the neighbors didn't like it.
Yeah, Brian, if you could scroll up so you can reveal yeah, so we're talking, whoops, stop. Just getting that picture right in the middle of the page, please. So we're trying to prevent the construction of the upper roof in this diagram versus the lower roof.
Because we don't want tall towering structures.
But
Right.
honestly, I think that's the 40-foot limit more than anything. I mean, if they're building really low floor to floor heights, I mean, are we talking, can we do a 3.5 story house in Winchester?
No, we can only do a 2.5.
Right, so I don't see how you would get to this gambrel with a 40-foot limit.
Yeah, but we also discussed last time about how tall the 40-foot limit is, and Brian's suggestion was that we actually just do that, just like bring it down, because we're taller than most towns anyway. But also some of these new McMansions are humongous, and really testing that.
But we have seen a number of the special permits that have come through recently have not been 40 feet tall. They have been 35. They haven't really gone to the max. I don't think you need to go to the max in this town to build a McMansion. So I just don't think it's that common. So this is one way of, rather than just saying nothing greater than, I mean, if we set it to 35, we would still see a lot of the houses that we perhaps think are too massive for the neighborhoods still being built.
Right. But this law was because we came upon uses of this law, and the use of it to kind of like almost a vulgar way to, it just seemed like, why how can somebody build, basically, if that gamble was true, like a 85%,
Right. So
above?
yeah. So
Sorry to interrupt, but I think this gambrel would never be built if you use the rule of 7 feet and 65%.
Correct,
Because
right. That's what we're trying to prevent.
Right.
That's exactly what I'm looking for, Cheryl. Thank you.
right. So we're getting back to what it is that we are trying to do with this revision to the
Well,
bylaw.
I'm trying to clarify the denominator too, Cheryl.
Right.
So what you just said, does that apply to the floor immediately below or the total building footprint?
You can have what if you have an L-shaped house?
I know, that's what I'm saying. It should be the floor immediately below, right? I don't think it should be total building footprint.
It totally matters what the percentage is. If you, whatever
Yeah.
the foot, so you're talking about hacking, that's what you would have to do, is that on each house, it could be different, meaning the first floor could be very large. And then the second floor could be half that size. So by saying, what it does by talking about just the floor below it is that you're guaranteed that it's going to be smaller than the floor below it. So that's one thing. That's one thing. Whatever percentage you do make it, if you make it of the floor below it, you'll at least know that it will be smaller than the floor below it. There is a possibility.
Is that smaller meaning shorter or smaller meaning less square foot?
The footprint.
The footprint. So
unless you're talking about a garrison colonial.
This happened. So looking at this example, this floor and this floor are the same. But you can imagine a house where the first floor is bigger, and then the second floor is smaller, and then this would be based upon the first floor. But let's say, so I have come around on this. If this is going to go forward, I think it does make sense for it to be the floor below. Right. But maybe the percentage is wrong. I don't know what 65 is. Like it depends.
Well, 65 is what the hacking was trying to do. It's that much. And if we are trying to encourage people to reuse their old, homes and use the attic as a way to perhaps add ADUs or to increase without, opening the footprint, then I think 65% is fairly, it seems fair. It seems like a generous.
Yeah, it's generous. That's right. And it's on the generous end of the comparisons that Cheryl saw that we had worked on.
Well,
right, because they're about 50% to 75.
Well, let's take a home, a reasonable sized home, and let's call it, I don't know, a total of 3,000 square feet total living area. So we'll divide that into, so it's 1,500 square feet for one story. Let's call that the building footprint is 1,500 square feet. So 65% of 1,500 square feet is.
So my 40 by 40 is about that. It's by 1,600 square feet, right?
Yeah, so 0.65 times 1,500 is 975 square feet. So we're talking about a fairly substantial.
Yeah, that's big.
Third story, or half story.
Right. So it's generous if you use the whole building footprint. And to me, the aesthetics of the half story are very much tied to the story immediately below.
But how many houses are there, and you know much better than I, where the second story has a different footprint from the first story? Okay, mine does, because I have a little addition off the back.
Right,
I just came up.
Exactly. You could have a house that has a larger first floor, second floor, and then the third level, which is deemed to be a half story, the calculation is based on that larger first floor, and it ends up being visually disproportionate. And I need to hear Cheryl and Iching chime in on that, because they're the trained architects and not I. But it feels like that's what the result would be.
I feel like the biggest additions are a kitchen bump out and then like a primary suite bump out, and that's just first, second, right? And so that's the typical, right? So then you're already having an equal footprint from with the second floor. So I mean, for somebody to in this example here that Brian has up, this peak thing is typically the original, you know, like 1850s house, which is like 1,800 square feet or something. And that's a hard thing to do when living contemporaries. And so you bump out the back for the kitchen, you bump out the primary suite. And people stop there typically. So, you know, that little tiny original house is a small footprint like that. And I think if we want to encourage people to continue to do it, to continue to build on the top, then they would have to build on top. And I mean, they can already do that here. Like I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying that like that original house, it's hard to build completely on top of the, 20-year-old addition.
So I guess, so if we're making the assumption that we want, if you're dealing with a house where the second floor has the same square footage as the first floor, then it doesn't matter which one we choose. If you're dealing with a house where someone has just done a bump out or an addition on the first floor, then we would prefer that the half story be more in proportion to the second floor, which is smaller, than to the first floor, which is larger.
But isn't that assuming that they're putting on a new roof or something?
In most,
they're gonna go up in that scenario?
well, you can certainly renovate the attic without adding anything onto it. I mean, that's essentially what we did. We had to put a dormer on to get the height requirement for the stairs, but it was very small. So you could certainly renovate an existing attic without adding a dormer, but most people seem to want to put a dormer on.
For headroom.
For headroom, and also to
Height.
create more living space, more usable area. I mean, so someone's going to put a dormer on. If we want to limit the total amount of size of this half story so that it doesn't look like a full third story, which is one of the reasons for doing this, was to try to make sure that if we're going to claim we're a 2.5 story town, we should look like a 2.5 story town. Then I think I'm agreeing with Brian that we should use the square footage of the second story as the divisor.
The entire second story.
The entire second story, use that as the divisor, and that would, it still puts on the requirement that you have a sloped roof.
And that over 7 feet and over not be more than 65% of the second story.
Right. So getting to the 65%, I don't know what it would be reasonable on a, let's say you do have a 1,500 square foot footprint for the second story. Is it reasonable to assume to get, almost 1,000 square feet out of your attic? Or is that something where we want to say 65% is too large? And so, go down to 50%, in which case you'd get, 750 square feet. I mean, 750 square feet is a reasonable amount of space.
What does Newton say, Cheryl? I don't have it in front of me.
So yeah, I think Dieb's getting at something here. I think that so Newton says a story directly under a sloping roof where the area with a ceiling height of 7 feet or greater is to be noted, is less than 2/3 of the area of the story next below. So it's basically saying that you could be 7 feet or greater because actually by code, you have to be 6'8", right? So nobody's going to build below that anyway. So 7 feet or greater, the greater you go, the greater your pitch. I'm making that up a little bit. I Ching, you might weigh in on that since you drew all of this. I haven't drawn it, and I have to draw things.
Yeah, me too. No, it's where the rafter meets the wall. That's the whole strange
Well,
one.
this
No,
is
it's
not.
clear
This is
we're-
not making any reference to where the rafter meets the wall. And when
It's
I
not
look
clear
through
head-
Okay, so the
diagram-
taller, yes, it's true. The taller you go, the greater the pitch. I would say that's true.
Yeah.
Right. So this is just saying you can go as high as you want, as long as you don't go over the height of buildings allowed. But you have to be at 7 feet, and at 7 feet, you are 2/3 of the story below you.
So that's essentially what we have here, because 2/3 is
Right.
essentially 66% or
Exactly.
67%. So
Exactly.
65%. So we're still in the same ballpark as Newton. So I would say, other than which footprint we're using in the divisor, we're equivalent to Newton in that respect. The question is, are we comfortable with the 65%, or is that something we want to lower? Again, it's a question of how much space do you want to see. I don't know how visually, the more space you give someone, the taller it's going to look, the steeper the pitch.
I think that's where that's where the dormers come in. And if you stick to 65%, then people will add dormers and daylight. I mean, if you have a living space up there already, unless they don't plan on anybody sleeping up there, then, people are just going to want windows in a living space on a half
We
story.
do have dormer laws though. I mean, we have the 50%, we have the offsets, we have those things to sort of control how that might look.
That's right.
We kind of do, and here's the difficulty here. There's a house on it's just 2 streets from mine, where they have a sort of a modern meets traditional. They took an older house and they renovated it, and they put in a very modern half to it. And what happened was that when they brought the modern section up to meet the roof, they essentially created a 3-story structure. But they deemed that the ZBA deemed that top story to be a dormer. Although when you look at it to the neighbor, it goes straight up. It's a flat wall that goes straight up, essentially all the way up, not quite up to the ridge of the old house. But so the definition of dormer is actually, I don't think we have a good definition.
Well, that's what I was saying before about all these things interrelate.
Sure.
Brian, in our dormer definition right now, Brian, does it say that the face of the dormer should be set back from the facade of the story below?
So hold on. So there's a lot of dormer.
I know.
There's a lot of things about dormer in the center business district. But the definition of a dormer, let me get this up. A projecting structure on a pitch roof with a window or windows set vertically.
So this is a really interesting point that you raised, and it's a completely other point, which is that we've got some really good regulations and definitions in the center business district that do not apply to other districts in town. And it's a topic for future discussion.
I think
This is the center business district definition. Sorry to interrupt.
No, this is not the center. This is not the center business district. This is the definition
Okay.
of dormer in
Yeah.
the zoning bylaw. Yep.
Okay, I would say this is a really poor definition of a dormer.
No, but 7.3.13.4. Can you go to the next dormer?
Ooh, I Ching. you
Well, I-
rock.
Oh, she rocks. She
No,
rocks.
I just controlled F.
So that's what I was saying, is that there's a lot of regulations related to
Yeah.
dormers in the center
Okay.
business district.
Right.
And
And so
it-
this is CBD?
Correct. 7.3 is the
Okay.
center business
All right,
district.
so that,
But there is, so if it is more than 50% across the roof plane, then it does require a special permit. That's what we have right now. So you can't put a whole shed dormer over
But
that whole, yeah.
Doesn't that just apply to CBD or does it apply to all districts?
The
Right.
50% across the width of the dormer or the width of the roof plane applies to all districts.
Site plan,
Right.
yeah,
We-
site plan review, I believe.
Site plan review.
We've had a lot of people come up before us for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we
So-
are in 425. This is where it is.
Right. So this is the width of the roof plane, not the length of the roof plane, which presumably is the vertical dimension. So we're kind of, I think we all agree that dormers are difficult and that, but we're not, but I just want to get us refocused on, we're not adding dormers to what's on our plate right now. So we need to figure out, are we happy with the language and the description as is? Is it going to be an improvement on what we have now? Is it incremental progress? Is it not enough progress to warrant a change? I think those are the questions in front of us right now, is we're not going to be able to add much more to this. So
I want to go back to the question of why we are so adamant on sloped roofs too. And if that is a thing of concern, because I do think with your concern about expression of roof pitch last time, yeah, I would advocate for the same thing for, flat roofs. Like why the priority on sloped roof?
I think
is
that
that?
originally this was designed to prevent triple deckers.
Right. I think that's exactly
Which
right.
is kind of a classist thing.
Yes, but if we're going to, so if we're going to redefine, if we're going to allow flat roofs, then we still have to come up with some way of making them appear to be a half story so that the buildings do not look like they're 3 stories tall.
Right. So then my penthouse example, you offset it.
The penthouse example could work but it also depends upon where it's viewed from, right?
Mhm.
So, there's a tension here between just saying, we don't really care what design you have. Flat roof, inverted roof, pitched roof, who cares? But somehow there is also the tension that there is a common architecture of sorts in town. Do we want to make sure that we harmonize with that at some level?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we have something that says you can't build a flat roof on a residential house?
If you build it 2 stories tall, yes, you can build a flat roof.
Right.
But as soon as you try to put in something over 2 stories, then you are in the half roof domain.
Half story. Yeah.
The half story, sorry. And at that point, you start getting into the definition of half story is underneath a sloped roof.
Gotcha.
I mean, but all roofs have to be sloped at least a little bit to, shed water. So a flat roof really is sloped.
Right, but it's very
Sure,
indiscernible. I mean,
but we don't have a slope.
So
That's
that's
true.
I mean, if we want to have that conversation about flat roofs and allowing them within for a half story, then we have a lot more work to do in trying to, so those will have significant ramifications on what's allowed in town. And it will be much more controversial because people will see it as a way of, they will see it as offensive to historic structures. I'm just saying that it's a more complex issue than just saying what we want to do now is not redefine what counts as a half story in terms of flat versus sloped and just handle the problem in front of us, which is trying to reduce the egregious nature of some of these taller than necessary half stories.
So what if you had a flat roof on a house that went up 2 stories, and then in the next story, it was considered a half story, slightly sloped because it's flat and it needs to pitch to drain, but you are only at 65%. So it's going to step back. Again, it's back to I Ching's, penthouse idea, but it does break down the massing of the house in a way that is probably, a better overall design than just having a giant, box flat on top. Right? So whatever it's built above in terms of a half story, it's only 65% of that. Even
Yeah, and what's holding that down is that 3 feet and above cannot be 3 feet above at the meeting point. So if that weren't there, and it could just do a 65% above 7 feet, just a straight up and then a slightly slope, I mean, that would be a way better design than this little weird, thing that I drew.
So let's say that I have some sort of HVAC equipment that I can stick in the eaves of my attic right now because I have eaves. But if I go to a penthouse design with a flat roof, where is all that HVAC equipment going to go?
They go on it goes on the, outside.
Right. So all of a sudden you're going to be having maybe little projections above your flat roof where someone has a condenser unit or something. And so we're going to end up with profiles of buildings which are going to look very commercial rather than residential. Typically, you don't see any of that equipment on a residential building. And we know that people are really upset when they see the elevator shafts pop up. And when we put in a limitation in the CBD, nothing can pop up more than 4 feet above the parapet. So we're going to have similar restrictions on the equipment that can be visible from a residential roof if it's flat.
Yeah, but honestly, except for split systems, I can't imagine someone putting that equipment on the top of their structure.
But it happens all the time in like Somerville.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I even had my sister lived in a fairly modernly built house where quite a bit of equipment was hidden up in the attic, which was completely unusable because it was just a bunch of joists going every which way because they built this insanely peaked roof they needed support. But there's a lot of HVAC equipment up there.
So
I don't know. I mean, if we're talking about a whole nother.
Right. So like, what if we did the proposed draft language? Let's say we use those points 1 and points 2, and the point 2 seems to be reasonable, 65% of perhaps the story underneath. But then point 1, the bottom of the roof rafter intersects the face of at least 2 exterior walls. That whole thing is about pitched roof. And so like, why even that, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you were willing to deal with the problem is you have the unintended consequences of all of a sudden dealing with what can you put on a flat roof? Can you put, there are other structures which could appear, and do I want to look out my window and see somebody's AC at my eye level because they've decided to put a penthouse plus an AC? I mean, I look out my attic window and I would be able to see that penthouse structure, and I would be able to see any sort of equipment which is there. So those are considerations that need to be taken into account if we're going to open this up to flat roofs. And I don't think that we've discussed all of those ramifications to make that change right now. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying that, we're just pulling on one thread.
Right.
So I would really like to, if we remove the sloped roofs, then we are making a significant change to this bylaw.
Right.
No, we wouldn't be, I don't think we're talking about removing the sloped roof, but we're not deterministic about the slope, right?
Well, we were talking about that 3 feet. And the question is, do you want to reduce it or is the 3 feet, 3 feet, seems to be the language used by other communities. Am I correct?
Well, look at the diagrams, right? The 3 feet really gives you the smallest slope.
Yeah, I think it's,
But you can-
Newton completely threw it out, right? It doesn't exist in Newton.
What, the 3 foot?
No. A story directly under a sloping roof where the area of the ceiling height of 7 feet or greater is less than 2/3 of the area of the story next below. That's
The
it.
story next below.
That's it. So what I think that one does is that it doesn't allow for a mansard. You know, a mansard is like a very steep, just like a pretty vertical, but just a little bit like this on all like 4 walls, right? And so like where
Right.
it meets is
No,
clearly a
this-
lot more.
Also,
And
Mary-
that's
This
very
doesn't
classic.
eliminate that because it just says at least 2 exterior walls. A mansard is
Yeah.
all 4 walls.
Right, but I'm saying the slope, where it meets the floor is much greater than 3 feet. A
In a
mansard just does
well,
this.
I've never seen a mansard that the intersection of the roof and the exterior wall, typically they occur at the second, in the middle or the upper part of the second story. And then the third, so part of it, like your third picture over, if you pictured that as a mansard. If you look at mansards around town, no, Cheryl, am I
Yeah.
wrong?
But the mansards also give you more than 65% of like headroom height, right?
Right. So
Yeah,
you could-
I owned a mansard, so the wall comes up like in the first drawing, rafter meets wall at 3 feet. And then there's a slight pitch to go up till you get to the 7 feet or 8 feet or whatever it is. And then you have this tiny little flat,
Yeah, but-
almost flat pitched roof at the top.
Yeah, correct.
So it's straight, slightly pitched with the dormers popping out, and then the top.
Right, and so then Cheryl, would you say then it is greater than 65% of the
A
square?
mansard would definitely be greater than 65%.
Right, so like
Yeah.
what we're doing is to prevent mansards, which is like not what I think our intended thing is. I mean,
No, but if you,
Well, unless the mansard started,
Lower.
was really pitched on the second piece, right? Because then the 7-foot mark would come in just like the pitched roof does.
if you look at it, if you look at a 2.5-story mansard in town right now, the intersection of the roof and the outside wall usually occurs in the upper part of the second floor. So that the second floor is partly got a sloped roof, and no, Cheryl, really?
No, it really sits on the wall above the 3rd floor.
Above the
So-
second floor, you mean?
right. So
I'm looking at the 3rd level, which is where the attic space is, right? Yes.
So
So it's
the
really, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say the mansards that we see around town may have been built long before. So they may already have greater than 65% within them. I
Right,
don't. So
That's
Also
So-
remember, the mansard is going to go all the way around. So we're showing a
Yes.
pitched roof.
right.
So the right and left are grayed out in the floor plan for 65%, but this is going to cut out all
Right.
sides of the building.
But there are a bunch of dormers too.
So I don't know that this prevents mansards. The key is if we
I don't think
want to
so.
keep something so that it doesn't look like a 3rd floor, a mansard all the way around looks like a 3rd floor.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, there's no way around that. It's just essentially a mansard is a 3rd floor with slightly tilted in walls. It's a full story. That's essentially what it is.
Like the
So-
bookends building is a mansard roof on all sides. And it's got a flat roof in the center.
I unfortunately can't visualize that. So
I just remember that.
it seems to me that we are not agreeing on one of the fundamental tenets of this revision, which is to maintain the sloped roof, the 3 feet. And
Yeah,
just
I would agree.
that particular value of where the rafters hit the walls. I don't see any consensus here. I mean, to be honest, I'm happy keeping it as 3 feet and putting in the change in 65% to limit the size, because I think that's a step forward. Um, but I don't know how the rest of the board feels on that.
But I Ching, I think that if we keep the 3 foot in there, with the wall, the knee wall or the exterior wall, I think we're limiting, I mean, unless somebody wants to do a 3 foot, you know, railing and then end up with another mass above that with a flat roof. I'm addressing the flat roof question,
So
if we
Yeah.
want to, see more contemporary design in residential.
Well, right now, the only way you would see a flat roofed in town by this standard would be a 2-story building. And it would be 2 stories with a flat roof. And that would be within our code, because we say no buildings shall be no more than 2, buildings shall not be more than 2.5 stories. So if you don't want a sloped roof and you want a flat roof, you make a 2-story building. And you could do that as a very, very modern expression of architecture. And technically,
But as I Ching was saying, if you do a parapet, meaning that little wall at the top, right? You can pitch your roof and not see it, and it'll still be a flat expression.
well, that's possible. So that would be included by our current law? I think so. So for instance, I Ching's penthouse seems to be completely permissible under current regs. And to be honest, I don't know, when we say it's under a sloped roof, does that mean the entire roof has to be sloped? Or just the part which, so there's, so you have walls that come up at an angle, and then you have a flat roof on top. So you take your mansard roof and you depress it. So it's flat. I mean, I don't know that this town is ready for an all-out modern aesthetic invasion of home design.
No, but I think we're talking about a hacking moment here, right? Yeah.
oh yeah, but hacking happens.
Well, the
Yeah, yeah.
question is, I mean, I really want to try to get us to a point where we can agree on what's going to be presented next Tuesday, because we don't
Right.
have what we present next Tuesday, we're making that decision now. So
Yeah.
I am uncomfortable with relaxing the 3-foot limit, because I don't know that we've thought through all of the ramifications of that.
I see.
The ramifications of eliminating the 3-foot limit.
Yes, we have thought a lot about the other things, but we haven't sat down and said, what happens if we eliminate the 3-foot unit limit? What sort of designs will we allow? And are those designs which, I mean, we're working from our own design sensibilities, but we also represent the town's sensibilities
Yeah.
at some level. So I feel this tension between me personally saying, let's go forward with ability to create all of these modern structures, but we don't know that the rest of town is willing to go forward with that. And I don't know that this is the best.
Yeah, no, remember, Diab, that we said it's no more than 3 feet. So if you
Well-
look at I Ching's first diagram on the left, the rafter meets the wall at 3 feet or less is what it really means to say. And so if somebody wanted to make the rafter meet the wall at 5 feet, that would be deemed a third story. And if somebody wanted to have the rafter meet the wall at 0 feet, then you would be into I Ching's second diagram. So I think the 3 feet is intended to be a not more than 3 feet or less.
Oh, I agree, but I still hear some attraction towards removing the 3 feet, which is apparently what Newton has done.
I don't think I favor removing the maximum 3 feet. I'd have to really do the deep dive on sort of geometry and geometric analysis here.
So,
So
yeah, so we are now at 10 minutes of 10.
yeah.
And I would thought we would be done by 9 this evening. So silly me.
I know. Well, Diab, I think
me.
that this was such an interesting exercise, and I think we did it because somebody did hack it, and we saw that it was egregious, and why weren't there rules to make it so that it didn't look so humongous and he took too much, right?
So
but now I'm what, that was the reason why. So like, but was it really what we want to, is it going to happen again?
One thing we looked at I Ching was, I Ching, remember that we looked earlier in our examination as a subcommittee or a subtask, whatever, that the maximum height of each story, and we backed out of that because for a number of reasons, and we said, let's just go back to the proportional argument of floor area as the way of determining this. Now, in other towns, and Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong, at least one other town in that research that I did had roof pitch as a spec, or not a spec, but a data point.
So I need to interrupt again, and I need to ask, are we going to approve this as written for next Tuesday? Or we don't have any more time this evening to discuss modifying it. We have only 10 minutes left. And we're going to have to put off our discussion of the tree subcommittee because that's going to take more than the time we've got.
Right.
So we need to make a decision as to whether we go forward with this language or whether we pull it. My personal position is I am in favor of going forward with this language because I think it improves on what we have now. It is not perfect. It does not do, I don't think it reduces the type of architecture that can be put in place, but so that's my piece.
Well, I would say I would be in favor of going forward with the proposed draft language because we put a lot of work into it, and I think that it stands the scrutiny of town meeting. Period.
So we've got 2 in favor and we have 2 still making up their minds.
I thought it was really interesting to just think through something so minute and to see the ramifications of it. And that to me was interesting. But I think I wonder if how likely it would be to be adopted. If people will see the problems that we presented in the page 1 of 1, like that was the reason why we went to this, was that people were,
Brian,
were taking advantage of the lack of rules.
Right.
I think
does this do it?
Keep going.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that this is a small enough modification that I think people will accept it based on the arguments that we present. I think that the key argument is the drawing you have, I Ching, where under the existing definition, you can create these large arching
Yeah,
structures.
Brian, go to page 1 of 3. There you go. That one.
That one. I think this is the, so politically, I think this is doable. I don't think even if it gets shot down, I don't think we lose a lot. We are not spending a lot of our political coin to do this, if that's a concern.
So one of the things that I have noticed as a town meeting member over the years is what helps a warrant article pass or not pass. And a big part of it is the what I call the preamble, or the case making that happens before discussion on the floor. And so I Ching's drawings are extremely valuable to that case making. I think we might want to be careful to not use the extreme hack images, because we want to stay true to what our purpose is, which is to keep the look and feel of the town as a 2.5-story town, and to not be overly prohibiting people from making habitable space on their 3rd floor of their existing structures, because we believe in not tearing down buildings. So therefore, keep the preamble really simple and clear, and say this is what we're trying to accomplish, and not really push the hacking images. It doesn't help our case in town meeting.
It seems like everybody I've talked to about this want to see the extremes of what this law would allow. So like the hacks, right? But I understand, like, I don't think we should present it in order to get people to think about extremes like flat roofs or whatever. But it seems like that's the question on everybody's minds, because they want to know what this allows.
What we're trying to get to is to preserve the proportionality of buildings and preserve the notion of a half-story capping our buildings. And frankly, if someone wants to build a 2-story flat roofed house in our town, they can totally do that. Right now, they can't build a 3-story flat roofed house. They can build a 2.5-story house where the 3rd floor, the 3rd story, is a half-story. That is to say, it's under slope roof and it's less than 65% of the story below. That, to me, is a simple enough clarification that from the existing definition, Brian, if you scroll to the very top where the existing definition is, a story directly below and which are less than 3 feet. I think that having the second clause about the 65% is clarifying, and that meets our goal. And it does preserve the look and feel of a town that has 2.5-story home, maximum 2.5-story homes with slope roofs. And even if we go to a zoning district in town where we would permit, for instance, 3.5 stories, it would still preserve the look and feel of the half-story roof.
Do you know how many votes we would need to adopt this? Is it just a simple majority, or is it a super?
This is 2/3.
2/3.
Yeah, so I would, I don't know if it helps or hurts making this decision. I would not concentrate on the presentation we would make to town meeting. I would just, and again, I don't think this is, if this doesn't pass, I don't think we lose significant political coin. I think this is something which can be, but I would really focus on, is this an improvement over what we have now? Does it accomplish something? Is the benefits of this great, large enough that you would think we would push it forward?
I think yes, because it will keep that very massive, high sloped
Right.
story from happening, which is what
Yeah.
happened on Wedgemere.
I'm just trying to concentrate I Ching and Cheryl, who are still
Sorry.
contemplating.
Sorry.
So
Yeah.
I think we should move forward with it. I think that number one is in the it's in the bones of what we are starting from, right? It's already there. So it's saying to the town, we are improving on what we have because we're starting with what we do have, which is that 3-foot limit. And then, but what we want to add to this is that with the 7 feet, which is a code, pretty much a code limit, the 65% means that we're not going to end up with something that doesn't stand up looking taller than a half story.
Right.
And so I think let's go for it. That's my vote.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. I enjoyed working on it. And I feel like we thought through it a lot. But I do think that it is a familiar enough topic, and it's for a lot of people to understand, but also maybe get anxious about, right? About like what the limits for them are, and like how, what does this do, and just a little bit of anxiety because it's so familiar, but maybe not enough skill set to like understand sort of the hacking or like that stuff. So I'm nervous about that. About presenting too much or go ahead. Sorry,
as much as you got our conversation really rich with the hacking, and I think we could all kind of work through that. I think it's way too much information for our presentation. I think, as Deb said, the first diagram, which shows the double, the gambrel, which is kind of reminiscent of of other things that could possibly happen with a pitch that's too tall. I think that's enough of a discussion about if you go straight up, we're not limiting that. We're not adding the 65% limit to some degree.
And I wonder maybe with the diagrams too, it's just the examples 1, 2, and 3 could be presented to show that there could be an expression of different pitches,
and they all result in the same calculation. That's one thing.
A little bit.
It's I think that so we can discuss what we will present at a later time. I think that this will have to be done carefully because it's much easier to lead people through from A to B to C than it is to lead them A through G in terms of some sort of decision tree or understanding what's going on. We've had problems in the past where what we thought were simple diagrams turned out to be challenged because people just didn't understand a lot of things. There are people who are not used to looking at visual drawings like this and being able to immediately understand what's being said. So we have to be careful. But I think we have reached a decision. I think we've all decided that we are moving forward with the language as presented, and that if Sally and I Ching, if you could make sure that you work with Brian to make sure whatever edit didn't make it through, since it certainly seems your correct language did make it through at some point. So just make sure that, Brian, if you could work with them to make sure that what goes into the packet on Friday is the correct stuff. And
Sure,
then,
yeah, we'll definitely make sure.
And then I I do think that we need to, I think we've reached the end of this discussion, and I think it's time to adjourn.
I just want to say thank you for all this work. Really well done. Thanks. so
Yeah,
much.
this is a really interesting journey. And we have much more work to do on this wonderful zoning bylaws. So.
Yeah, but this got the team warmed up, I think.
It really did.
Yes.
It really did. Each thing you're hacking and you're drafting is really, really, really helpful.
Oh, and Sally, I appreciate getting all the towns' different examples too. That was super.
So on a sidebar note to that, I'm working on a similar exercise. It's a multi-town comparison of multiple data points of a zoning bylaw related to another matter that will be before us in the future. So that's my contribution to
Okay,
that
that's
one.
a teaser, but you can't tell us
Yeah,
what it
no
is because it's
kidding.
Oh,
not
I
on the
can't, 'cause
agenda.
it's not on the agenda.
Okay, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Okay, Cheryl moves. Is there a second?
Second.
I Ching seconds. Roll call vote, please. Sally Dale,
I
Ching Scott,
Aye.
Cheryl Wolf,
Hi.
Be Jarius. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much to our recording secretary, Nancy
Queensway.
Okari, to WinCam, and to everyone out in TV land. We will see you in 7 days. Have a
Thanks,
great week,
Tina.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye. Have a good
Brian.
night.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you.
Nancy.
Oh, thank you,
Bye-bye.
Brian. You're still there.
Oh yeah,
right?
Brian.
Brian.
And
Yeah, well-
Nancy.
Yeah. Okay. Have a
Good
good
night,
evening.
everybody.
Okay, bye.
Night.